Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Squadron Leader Peter Lisney, and in this episode we look at rapid capability development with Commercial X.
Having something that is a 60, 70, 80% solution now and moving it towards a 90, 100% solution over the next 2 years may well be better than having nothing now and waiting 2-3 years until we get a solution.
We're trying to challenge policy, trying to challenge process to enable that kind of continuous development to really flourish in defence.
Effectively, we're taking that very linear capability development process and turning it into a spiral that we can get around a lot more quickly and deliver capabilities to the warfighter when they need it.
Also, in this episode, we'll reheat a few stories just in case you missed them, and we'll be finding out who is under the hat this week.
What's your profession?
I'm on the Royal Air Force Parachute Display Team, and we're based here at RAF Brize Norton.
Find out who is under the hat at the end of this episode. Now, commercial may not be everybody's cup of tea, but according to the RAF's Chief Modelling and Simulation Officer, it's actually about delivering capability at pace that today's warfighter needs. Group Captain Rauri Henderson-Begg and Tom Purser from Commercial X talk to us about rapid capability development for a 5th Gen Air Force. Group Captain Henderson-Begg, Tom Purser, thank you for joining us on Inside Air. We're going to talk about the commercial world, and as a listener, don't switch off just yet, because I want you, sir, and Tom, you're going to have about 30 seconds to sell this to the listener.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to the 22-year-old me who's just joining the Air Force, and if I spoke to that young man and I told him he would be in 20, 30 years' time more interested in commercial processes and modelling and simulation than getting into an aircraft, he'd have turned around and walked off. Flying is really important, and being an operator is a huge part of my life, but I'm now in a place where I am making sure that the next generation of warfighters have the capabilities they need when they need them. And that's really what that's all about.
So you trusted, as a young aviator, you trusted that someone else had done the job that you're doing today? Yeah, pretty much. And I needed them to have done that job properly so that I was able to operate effectively and safely and come back alive from operations. Well, you're clearly alive still, but were they good at their job?
There were areas, as I think we'll find out in a few minutes, where maybe the capabilities weren't as good as we would like them to have been.
Okay. Tom, sell it.
Right, you've given me a difficult chance to try and sell commercial now. No, thank you, Peter. And I have to say that being in commercial, you get to experience so many different things, different people. In the short time I've been with the MOD, which is since about March this year, I've gone to different air bases, seen different technology, different capabilities being developed, understanding what it is that the customer wants, and being able to help the customer. And for me, that's where the ultimate satisfaction comes, that being able to help the customer deliver what they need at pace and get them what they want as quickly as possible in the right manner, with all the right controls, but seeing that capability come to life, that's really, really interesting and really key to how we enable the customer to deliver.
Tom, you're a parent, aren't you?
I am, yes. I have two. I have a 2.5-year-old going on 20 and a 7-month-old.
Okay, so is procurement like being mum and dad?
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah, in some ways it is.
Especially when it's coming towards Christmas, looking at.
Absolutely, you got to make your value for money argument and all the presents, and generally it's they get what they want. However, that's fine.
The voice of reason.
Absolutely.
And that then paints me as the noisy child who's asking for all the Christmas presents in the shop, which is not an unfair picture, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, aircrew, operators of any kind always want the best kit, and they want it to be as good as they can, and they want it as quickly as they can, and that's the difficult job that we then ask Tom to help us achieve.
Yeah, and you're not an only child though, because there's a soldier and a sailor as well after that same cache.
Absolutely, and now space guardians as well.
Yeah,
space operators as well.
Yeah. And do you know what, Peter? People always think commercial is a dry subject, and we try not to be. But I think what you're about to hear in this podcast, I think will hopefully bring to life what it is we're trying to do, and actually show that commercial is not a dry subject. It is actually interesting, and might help people sit up and think, "Oh, commercial. Never thought of that before."
Okay.
It
So
might
let's
not go quite that far, Tom.
So you were a tornado navigator, GR1, GR4?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Germany for 4 years, from 1997, and then back to the UK to Lossiemouth. So left the jet in about 2012 in the end.
Okay, so as a listener, if you're not sat on a sandbag right now, I want you to pull up your sandbag and, sir, tell us about life and the backseat of a tornado. Give us a good story.
Sure. Okay. So it's the middle of 1999. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. I am at 20,000 feet above Kosovo in a Tornado GR4 with my pilot. I'm one of a 4-ship of GR4s. I'm one of a large package of about 20 aircraft going against targets in the Kosovo conflict. We've taken off from Bruggen about 3 hours before. We've flown down over continental Europe. We've done some quite interesting tanking in the dark to make sure we have enough fuel. And we're now gone over the Badlands and we're going in towards our target. Clearly, we're quite tense at this time and keeping our eyes out with our night vision goggles on and looking at all our instruments. And suddenly we get indications that we're being looked at and then locked up by a surface-to-air missile system, which clearly gives us quite a clenchy bum feeling. And at the same time, we start to see missiles coming up at us in the sky, and you can very clearly see that the smoke and the flames coming up. Now, we've got a self-defense system on the aircraft that is nominally capable against this missile, but it's had limited testing against live systems. It's been tested pretty much theoretically, and it's been given some as exhaustive as we can live trials, but there's not 100% certainty it will work. So as well as putting out our electronic self-protection measures, we need to get rid of our fuel tanks, get rid of our weapons, and put the aircraft into some fairly aggressive maneuvers that end up with us going fairly heavily nose down in the dark towards the mountains and going down well below 10,000 feet before we come up and sort ourselves out. Now that's a win for the enemy because we're now too late to go to our target, and so that target escape, somebody else has to go back and do it another day. We survive, but the whole point of the story is that we need to be able to get our procurement right. So when our Typhoon pilots, our Lightning pilots now are in the same situation, they can have absolute faith that the capabilities on their aircraft work, and that they have a better chance of surviving and carrying out their mission. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Tom, how does that story make you feel as one of the team that's responsible for delivering?
Yeah, I think, no matter who you speak to in the MOD, we're all pulling the same cord and pulling towards the same objective. That the main thing that matters to us is to ensure that people like Rauri and, the crew, the warfighter, are protected sufficiently enough, to allow them to get onto target, to allow them to do their jobs. And listening to those kind of stories, it really brings home and brings to life some of the problem sets that we face in not being able to sometimes react quickly enough to changes in the operational environment. You look at how well, just as an example, the Ukrainians have done in adapting the way that they do countermeasures, etc., at pace. And you hear that from an enabler's point of view, from anyone who works in, the delivery point of view, and that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that your warfighter's protected.
Okay. So back to your story, sir. You talked about the missiles being there. There was obviously a great deal of hope that the systems would work. Now, how does that relate to the job you do today and what you're trying to achieve for the Royal Air Force?
Yeah, so a large part of that capability development program is the development bit, and we need to get that right so that when we actually procure a system, we know that it's going to work. And there's a large part of that more and more nowadays as we move towards a more digital world where that development work is done in a synthetic environment, in a digital environment, as you were. So if the Air Force is going to be an intelligent customer, if we're going to be able to engage with industry to make sure that our requirements that we're writing for them to deliver are the right ones, and to make sure we're asking for what we need to understand what we need. And a good place to do that is in a simulated environment, whether that is, like an aircraft simulator, or in this case, a more experimental environment where we can change parameters, change capabilities, and actually understand what we need and what the eventual solution looks like.
And is this for training up front or ongoing training that you would do when you reach the front line?
In this case, it's about capability development. It's about understanding what those capabilities are and how they work. Now, that might be a whole host of things. That might enable us to work out what our force mix is. So, for instance, how many Typhoons or how many Lightnings or how many AWACS aircraft we need. It might be working out tactics, how we're going to actually employ those aircraft. It might be about how the capabilities, the weapons, the countermeasures, anything on those aircraft work. But we want to have a good understanding of that, first of all, before we procure them, so that we know we're procuring the right things, but then once we've procured them, so that we know we can use them in the right way. And there's an important piece here that moves us towards a synthetic environment, and that's security. So you only have to look at Ukraine to know that everything that we do, everything that happens in the real world is seen, generally recorded, and then analysed by our opponents and sometimes our enemies to understand what we're capable of doing. So if we want to maintain our operational sovereignty, our ability to act, and our operational effectiveness, then ideally we want to be able to bring capabilities to the battlefield that our enemy hasn't seen before, and that will surprise them. So therefore we need to develop those capabilities and practice using them in a secure environment that is difficult to oversee and that we can keep private. And the synthetic environment, whether that's in the training space or in the capability development space, allows us to do that much more effectively than the live environment.
So if I get you right here, what you're saying is if aircrew were training over the North Sea or somewhere over Cardigan Bay, very fast, even high, an adversary could monitor that activity by some means or another, the way that the whatever's going on. But by putting it into the synthetic environment, it can't be monitored.
Correct. If you look at Ukraine and if you look at drones, UAVs, and the speed at which they're evolving, it's very much a poacher gamekeeper type mentality where one side will do something, they'll bring a new capability to the battleground, and that's very effective for a few days until the enemy works out what they're doing, then comes up with a way to counter it, brings out a countermeasure that then the Ukrainians, for example, have to learn to counter the countermeasure, and improve their capabilities. So there's a very rapid evolutionary cycle going on there. Now, if you can take that out to a certain extent by doing your capability development in a synthetic environment using detailed models of enemy capabilities and your own capabilities until you know they're effective, then on day one, night one, when you need to use them, nobody's seen them before, and so nobody's had a chance to prepare, nobody's had a chance to develop counters to them.
Does that mean that day one, night one has to be an awful lot of activity because it's going to be disclosed? The adversary is going to see what you're doing and analyze it.
Well, that's your first chance, isn't it? And if you, I guess you could equate it to a West End show, an opening night. As soon as you get to opening night and the critics come in and the public come in, then people start to talk about the show, and everybody who goes to see it on night two kind of knows what to expect. And it's exactly the same sort of thing. Once you've done something once, people might not quite understand exactly what you've done, but they certainly know you've done something. They know what to look out for, and it doesn't take long necessarily to understand, okay, that's what's happening here, and then to start thinking, how do we get around that? How do we counter it? How do we stop them doing it?
And Rory, sorry, Peter, I think just to add to that from my perspective as well, I think there, as you said, how quickly it quickly layers above, up and up and up in terms of, they find a countermeasure to the countermeasure. I think in the synthetic environment, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you can actually scenario plan that already. So you can say, this is what we do to counter this threat, but then this is how they could react. And then you create this scenario that enables you to continue that development and to try and to see how it would play out. I'm assuming that, from what we've talked about of this capability, that it does enable you to do that kind of level of prep.
Absolutely. And it's also a safe environment. So actually, if your tactics don't work, then you just stop the simulation, reset it, and start again with a new set of tactics. And so it's a safe to fail environment. And of course, if you're doing it in a synthetic environment, there are times when you can run things many times faster than real life. So you can go through a scenario a number of times very quickly, using changing a number of different factors and understanding exactly what your best route is to a real capability.
So let's talk about Eldon. What is Eldon? And then we're going to get on to why you ended up speaking with Tom and his colleagues.
Yeah, sure. So Elden is an attempt to do just that. Elden is a project, a work strand within the Rapid Capabilities Office, which is an experimental part of the Air Force where we look at new things. We try and bring capabilities into operation rapidly, hence the name. And the part of that deals with the digital space is called the Air Information Experimentation Lab, the AIX. So Elden is an AIX work strand that was designed to understand whether the Air Force could develop its own synthetic experimentation capability and then use it to answer force and capability development questions. So we're currently on Elden Stage 6, which is what we'll talk about in a moment. The first 3 stages of Elden were all about building the capability and understanding how it worked and whether we thought it was going to be useful. And then Elden Stages 4, 5 and 6 have been using it to answer specific questions in that force development process that would have operational utility. So if I give one example from a stage of Elden, Gladiator, with the capability that I delivered that provides operational training for air and actually as a multi-domain integration training capability, we wanted to see how we would introduce space effects for the terrestrial players, because that's something we just can't do in the real world. So by space effects, I mean things like GPS for position, timing for your radios, your secure radios, and for your data links. If you start to lose those, you really start to degrade your comms and your position and your navigation. And clearly, when you're operating in live airspace and you've got other people there and you've got safety factors, that's not something you want to start messing around with, but you can do it in a simulator. So part of Elden Stage 5 was to look at how we would go about introducing that, we called it a space wrap for Gladiator, so that when we're doing a Gladiator exercise, we can start to go, okay, today we're going to see what happens when your GPS doesn't work or is degraded, and whether you notice and how that affects your tactics and how that affects your success rate.
So what does Elden physically look like? I mean, what are we talking about? So to visualize what's happening here.
It's not really very sexy, to be honest. Elden is it's a synthetic environment, so there's nothing that you can get and play in. It's something you see on a screen, much like Call of Duty or Minecraft. You're looking into a virtual world. It's run in a secure set of infrastructure and on sort of MOD servers. And it's controlled by a number of different software components that we've pulled together into a system of systems that allow us to conduct the experimentation, to record it, and then to analyze the results and understand what they mean.
Okay, so we're not talking about integrating with flight simulators or anything like that?
Not in this instantiation, no. That's more in the operational training piece. So that would be the next stage. So with the Gladiator Spacewrap, we developed it in Elden. We worked out that it was something that was useful and had utility for operational training, and we're now incorporating that into the Gladiator operational training capability at Waddington, and we'll start using that once it's fully integrated into that system of systems.
Okay, so we're talking more of a desktop, what we might think of a desktop exercise. Is that fair?
You run it and you access it via some desktop computers, but it's not really. I guess more if you think of it as the Minecraft world or the Call of Duty world, it's a virtual world in which you do activities.
Okay, right, and you set the parameters for the interaction between the asset and the effects and so on.
Yeah, so let's take an example that might be current integrated air and missile defense. So what do I mean by that? Let's look at the conflict in the Middle East and the recent attacks by Iran on Israel, where there were ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, aircraft launching missiles at Israel, and Israel was combating them with its Iron Dome system and its aircraft to shoot those down. And that is an integrated air and missile defense system. Now, without having that and without being able to coordinate the aircraft, the guns, the missile systems that were defending Israel, a lot more damage would have been done. So what something like Elden allows us to do is use detailed models both of our potential adversaries' capabilities and of our own developing capabilities to work out A, whether those capabilities are effective, and B, how we would best use them in a similar situation.
Do the results ever surprise you?
The results constantly surprise us, especially once you start to bring in machine learning and AI that optimize how you do things, because they think in potentially a very different way to ourselves. So they'll come up with an idea that you go, that is barking. Why would you do that? I'd never have thought of that, but it's very effective.
Okay, right.
So you have to have an open mind, understand what the results mean and what they mean for us.
Okay. Now, so where did Commercial X come in to this? Was it at the start of Elden, or so there's been a number of iterations, haven't there?
No, so we're on Elden Stage 6 now, and that's the first stage that Commercial X have been involved in. Each Elden stage of activity takes between 6 months to a year, so they're quite short bursts of activity. They get after a specific question, and it's meant to be an agile capability. These are specific questions that we want to answer quickly. And when I came into the post, one of the first things I took on was setting up Elden Stage 6, and immediately got in touch with Air's commercial team and went, right, this is what I need to do. We've done 5 stages of this before. It should be a fairly well-trodden path. We know who we want to do the activity. We know what we want to do. We know how much money we've got. Let's get on with it. And it's not as simple as that. And as I said before, our normal commercial systems are very good at doing the big commercial procurements. They understand that commercial landscape very well. What they have less experience with is the agile commercial, or the agile aspects of the commercial landscape, especially when you're doing test and evaluation, when you're doing experimentation work that is short term, that to an extent has a bit of risk in it that we accept, because the risk is if we're asking the wrong questions or giving people the wrong information or not enough time or not enough money, they're not going to come up with an answer that is useful to us. And it became apparent that the commercial tail for this activity was going to be longer than the activity itself. And then it was suggested that I might want to get a second opinion from Commercial X as to whether there was another route to market and a more elegant and effective way to do this. And this is where I came in to start speaking to Tom.
Before Tom got involved, what would have been the consequences of going down the traditional route?
Traditional route, we were looking at running a competition, which I have no problem doing, but it takes 3 months to run a competition. You've got to do it in a couple of stages. You've got to get everybody read in to what they're trying to do so that they can actually give you an effective bid. And then you're into to how you down select, and that's both on technical terms and economic terms. And effectively, it just makes the process longer, and in many extents we expected it would come to the same end point anyway. We had a contractor who'd done 5 stages of Elden. It's a bespoke system that you need to understand. You need specific security clearances and specific subject matter expertise in the right areas and the right programs to be able to get up and running. So bringing somebody else in would have been fine. They might have had the technical knowledge, they might have had familiarity with the individual components of the system, but they would have needed time to get up to speed and to be ready to go. So not only would we have added time for competition, but we'd have added time and therefore cost for another contractor to come in and get up to speed. So that 1 year of activity might have added an extra 6 months of activity and therefore significant extra cost, slowing down answers that we're looking for to inform our strategic defence review submissions and how we develop our capabilities coming out of that strategic defence review.
And I guess if it wasn't, in other scenarios, and maybe Tom can maybe give some other examples, you've also got the issue of the world moves very quickly, and the world of conflict moves very quickly. Tom, tell us what you do differently.
I think so. In terms of, we don't do anything differently, so to speak. We follow the same governance, same policies, same procurement regulations as standard commercial teams. What we do have, though, is a set of freedoms that the other commercial teams don't have in terms of self-governance, having a higher risk appetite. It just enables us to take maybe a higher risk profile, but looking at that in a pragmatic way to benefit the end user. Traditional commercial routes, they've got so many layers of complexity around how they engage sometimes that it does stifle sometimes the agile methodology because they've got these swim lanes that they need to follow. Whereas because of the freedoms that Commercial X have, it enables us to have greater utility and speed of delivery, and to look at things a bit more closely. The amount of times that me and Rauri have talked about Elden and others on a one-to-one basis, sometimes daily or weekly, to understand the problem. That's where the Commercial X model has really benefited. I believe that we've been able to understand that problem to get to the delivery part of that at a pace.
And I think there's another layer to that as well. I'm by no means a commercial expert, and over the last 6 years I've done an awful lot of learning in this area, but I know enough to know how complex the commercial field is, and nobody can be an expert in every part of it. And for me, ComX's USP is that they're focused on that short-term experimental pilot type activity that really suits the experimental piece. So they know the ins and outs of that part of the commercial landscape in a way that Air Commercial or D&S Commercial know the ins and outs of a different part of the commercial landscape a lot better. And so it's not a case of Commercial X are better than anyone else. It's just that for this specific example and the requirement that I had, Commercial X were able to help me understand and quickly deliver and develop a route to market for me that enabled me to get the activity on contract when I still had the money available.
Okay.
And I think that's you're absolutely right there, Rory, that, you know, where we sit within the commercial landscape, we are very much, you know, we get involved in R&D, innovation, testing of immersion and current capability. That is our USP. That we are the SMEs, and that we have a team who are very accustomed to working in those sorts of environments. Whereas, as Rory said, Air Commercial, D&S Commercial, the other commercial teams, they sit on the other side of that, where something has gone to a full operating capability model, and they need to deliver, you know, tanks, planes, ships, etc. Whereas we do sit in that earlier development stage, trying to, you know, fail fast, so to speak. You know, try something, see if it works. If it doesn't work, fine, we'll try again in a different way.
And where is Elden 6 today?
So Elden 6 is in train. We're about, when did we get on contract? So, you know, one of the really interesting things was the speed at which Commercial X can work and helped us work. You know, I probably was about 5 or 6 months into my attempts to get Elden 6 going before I spoke to Commercial X, and it was then less than 4 or 6 weeks before we got on contract from that point, and largely that was me holding the process up and the Air Command endorsement process and approvals process holding that up. So we were on contract at the beginning of December, and we've got that work is ongoing at the moment and should report, sorry, December, I meant September. That work should report in sort of May, June time next year, and feed straight back into the programs that it's designed to benefit.
Sam really worked you hard on this one, didn't she, Rory?
She's a scary woman, I have to tell you.
She knows how to get things done, and she's a great member of our team. Who, I can't sing her praises enough. She really knows how to get stuff delivered for us. So
I've got to ask you a question here about time frames. Who waits for who more? Tom, are you waiting for the group captain, or group captain? Are you waiting for Commercial X? Who's quicker?
I am the slow swimmer in this, or rather, the Air Force is the slow swimmer in this. And the reason for that is we've got to go through the due process of justifying what we're going to do in terms of running a business case, and then justifying the spend in a time when we all know that money is very tight. So we have to make sure, and the decisions get taken at quite an elevated level, that what we're doing is a priority, that we need to do it, and we need to do it now, because otherwise there are plenty of other programs that want that money. Thank you very much. So it took a while to get through that process, but that process is absolutely necessary. But Sam was kicking her heels and waiting for me at every single stage of the process.
And generally, we are kind of nudging you all the time, aren't we, Rory, to say, has this been done yet? Has this, what's the update on this? You know, we're chomping at the bit to get going. And we're normally pushing Rory for an answer. So then Rory has to run around and try and find out where the business case or wherever it is we're asking from is in the process.
Yeah, Sam's quite a lot younger than me, but I'm pretty sure I ended up calling her mum a couple of times. It's like, yes, mum, I'm sorry, mum. I know I'm not doing well enough.
So you'll have a lot of your colleagues listening to this today, and some of them will be going through procurement processes or want to achieve more with their programs. What sort of conditions do you think would warrant getting involved with Commercial X?
It's a good question, Peter. So first of all, Commercial X is not the right solution for everything. and I don't think Tom would argue with that. But they've certainly demonstrated that there are areas where they have strengths, and actually the other commercial arms of the Air Force understand that. So now when you put, and Tom, correct me if I get this wrong or add to it, when you put a new requirement into the commercial portal, it'll go through a triage and assessment phase, and that assessment phase will look at who is best placed to deliver it. Now, that may well be Commercial X, it may well be Standard Air Commercial, it may well be another route. But what it means is that each activity goes to the people who are best equipped to deal with it and to move it forward quickly. And I think that's a really good relationship. Commercial X, I don't see as being in competition with any of the other commercial arms. They complement them, and they allow everybody to focus on what they're good at and where they can add value.
Absolutely, Rory. And our ultimate aim at the end of the day is that we're customer centric, and we want it to make it as easier for the customer as possible to engage with commercial as a whole. And as you said, we've got a great relationship with Air Commercial. We work very closely with them to ensure that when an air requirement comes in through that front door, that they don't have to then go to 5 or 6 different people trying to find the appropriate commercial desk officer to deliver this. They will get essentially either someone from Air Commercial contact them, or someone from Commercial X contact them, or another commercial team to say this is going to be who's going to be delivering your requirement, and then they run with that. And I think that's where, as Rory said, we're really trying to bring about that commercial enablement piece and trying to make the customer at the centre of all of that.
And that timeliness is really important. As we said earlier on, capabilities are evolving at a rate of knots. If I go back to my Gladiator days, we wrote the requirements for Gladiator in 2014, 2015, but didn't get on contract till 2019 and didn't get to initial into service until 2023. That's nearly 10 years later. And the upshot of that is we're already evolving Gladiator because our requirements and our needs have moved on, but also the technologies available to us to satisfy those requirements have moved on. So being able, certainly in the capability development world, being able to move quickly and in an agile fashion and evolve as you go through is really important.
I think probably the final question to wrap things up here would be thinking of our sailors, our soldiers, our aviators on the front line facing an adversary. What does Commercial X mean to them?
I think it's a really good point, and I think for them it's around about how they get the countermeasures, how they get the equipment that they need and get the technology development done at pace. It's all very well having a capability, but if that capability goes redundant within a few weeks of you being in a war-like scenario, then trying to get that countermeasure back is really tough. So for Commercial X, for the warfighter, we're here to try and solve those problems, and those emerging capabilities, those emerging technologies, trying to develop them at a pace that is not just not cavalier, but it's at a pace that makes it available to the warfighter quicker to enable that continuous development, that continuous progress towards a safer environment, whilst also ensuring that it's value for money and all the rest of the arguments as well.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. The new Director Capabilities and Programs, Vice Marshal Begg, is very clear that everything we do in the capability development area is focused on what the frontline need now and tomorrow. So the ability to bring capabilities into service quickly, and even accepting that might mean they might not be perfect on day one, but they are good enough, and we can then evolve them in service and take away the lessons, just as you see happening in Ukraine. Provided we're set up to be able to do that, having something that is a 60, 70, 80% solution now and moving it towards a 90, 100% solution over the next 2 years may well be better than having nothing now and waiting 2-3 years until we get a solution and losing out on the opportunity to develop it in real life and in real time.
And you wait 2 or 3 years for that solution, and then it's will become redundant. And
Correct.
It becomes redundant very, very quickly. And then you've got to go around that whole loop again. So you're looking at another 2 or 3 years before you get the upgrade to that. And this is a continuous cycle, which we're trying to break. We're trying to challenge policy, trying to challenge process to enable that kind of continuous development to really flourish in defence.
Effectively, we're taking that very linear capability development process and turning it into a spiral that we can get around a lot more quickly and deliver capabilities to the warfighter when they need it.
This is really good. The impressions that I've had in the past is that it's from the user to procurement is an us and them. You two sound very much like an us. You're on the same team.
100%. And go on, Rory. Go on.
That's the plan. Everybody in AirCap has an operational background, so we understand the point of the warfighter, and we're trying to make things better for our brothers and sisters on the front line. We're trying to be an intelligent customer for industry, so we can articulate to them what we need and help them understand how to deliver it. And Tom and the relationship I have with Tom and his team is a really important part of that, because it stops it being such a transactional us and them relationship with industry and becomes a lot more collaborative and a lot more beneficial to both sides of both parts of the team.
Yeah, and it goes for all commercial as well. That unfortunately, commercial, as with all of the, I think, civil service, Air Force, across the entire defence sector, struggles with capacity and struggles with being able to get that capacity in SHWEP, up to speed quickly. Whereas we've been able to complement air commercial and complement their capabilities to say, look, we're the experts in this area. We'll take this area, drive it forward, work in tandem with the other commercial teams to make sure we get the right outcome for the customers. Because it's all very well doing all this really quick, rapid development and capability, but then if it falls over when it goes into full operate capability, really we've not helped anyone. So the relationships that we have with our commercial colleagues and then the customer is so centric to what we're trying to do that keeping in constant communication with people like Rauri and the other customers that we have, understanding their problems, not just for now, but in the future, really flourishes in terms of what we can do as a commercial enablement team.
And that's a three-way conversation as well with Air Commercial, for example, who will end up taking the stuff we've done with Commercial X onto the next level, or in parallel work strands. There are other activities I'm working with Air Commercial on where they are the right route to market for me. They are the experts in the area, and Tom's team aren't, and it's just a case of using the right tool for the job or the right people for the job.
Really good. Well, Group Captain Henderson-Begg, Tom Purser, thank you for shedding light on this sometimes challenging, difficult, but obviously moving in the right direction part of defence. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
This is Reheat for InsideAIR, where we take a look at some of the RAF stories you may have missed. I'm AS1 Chris Keane. The Tactical Leadership Programme is delivering a first. RAF engineers are performing servicing and cross-maintenance activities on Italian Air Force aircraft and vice versa, during exercises and operational air policing worldwide. Wing Commander Andy Shaw, Officer Commanding of 29 Squadron, says it's part of wider NATO Agile Combat Employment initiatives.
Today we're at the Tactical Leadership Programme in Spain to give high-end warfighting training. In the air they'll be working together with our NATO allies. Interoperability on the ground means that we can have Italian technicians working on UK Typhoons using German spare parts seamlessly. And that's one of our great strengths. I can work with a German Typhoon pilot or technician and I can learn a lot from them because they'll look at the same problem and just attack it differently. And that diversity of thought is something that's really, really important as you look to make the best of our capabilities.
RAF and Royal Navy pilots will benefit from a cutting-edge new cruise missile. It's following the first successful guided firing trials of Spear in Sweden, where the weapons system was launched from an aircraft for the first time. It's a next-generation turbojet-powered miniature cruise missile. The Atlas is celebrating 10 years of service and capability. The aircraft at RAF Bryce Norton is a multi-role military transport aircraft that has redefined strategic and tactical airlift worldwide. The first of the 22-strong fleet of aircraft was delivered to the Oxfordshire station on the 17th of November 2014. And finally, the RAF's Tactical Medical Wing have put their skills and readiness to the test. They've taken part in Exercise Athena Phoenix, a 2-week training exercise that was held at Lucas Station in Scotland and Strensall Barracks in North Yorkshire. And that was Reheat for Inside Air.
I'm AS1 Ben Russell, and this is Under the Hat, where we get to know an aviator in less than a minute. Name you're known by.
I'm Sergeant Luke Riddle.
What's your profession?
I'm on the Royal Air Force Parachute Display Team and we're based here at RAF Bryce Norton.
What's the best thing about your job?
The best thing about the job is being part of a close-knit team and the travel that we get to do as well.
Hardest part of your job?
Is learning new skills and testing them out under pressure.
Best location you've served?
We're very fortunate we get across to California and the weather's a massive bonus out there.
What bit of luxury kit do you never deploy without?
I've got this Hatch alarm clock that's really good. I like that.
And what's your proudest moment in the RAF?
Probably winning the 2018 Inter-Services Rugby Championship.
Thank you, Sergeant Riddle, for jumping into this episode of Under the Hat.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.